My husband died on a Tuesday. The police called me at 6:42 inches the morning, and I remember looking at the clock like that detail would somehow explain what they were saying. A head-on collision on Route 9, just 12 minutes from our house. Daniel had left early, the way he always did. Coffee in a travel mug, keys jingling in his hand, a quick kiss on my forehead. I hadn't even been fully awake. That was the last time I touched him, and I'd been asleep for most of it. We'd been married for 4 years. He was 34. I was 31. And the thing I couldn't stop thinking about, even at the funeral, even when his mother held both my hands and told me he loved me more than anything, was the storage unit on Crestwood Drive that he'd never let me go near. He'd paid for it out of his personal account. I only found out about it because I was going through our finances the week after he died, trying to understand what I was dealing with, and there it was. A line item, every month for 3 years. 12 by 20 feet of space. Unit 14B at Crestwood Self-Storage, about 20 minutes from our apartment. I'd asked him about it once, casually, maybe a year into our marriage. He said it was old band equipment. He'd played guitar in college. I hadn't pushed. There were bigger things to talk about, but Daniel hadn't played guitar in 10 years, and the monthly charge was almost $400, which is a lot to spend on a college hobby you never mention. At the funeral, my brother-in-law Marcus stood beside Daniel's mother, shaking hands and accepting condolences with the exact posture of someone who'd practiced it. Marcus was 6 years older than Daniel, broad-shouldered, always a little too interested in other people's money. He'd never liked me. He didn't hide it well. When Daniel and I got engaged, Marcus took Daniel to dinner alone and told him I was marrying up. Daniel told me about it 2 days later, laughing, but the look in his eyes said it hadn't been funny in the moment. The morning after the funeral, Marcus called me. "I'm going to help you sort through Daniel's things," he said. It wasn't a question. "I'll let you know when I'm ready for help," I told him. "Mara." His voice took on that particular tone, the one that always made me feel like I was a child being corrected. "You don't know what you're dealing with. Daniel had complicated financial arrangements. You need someone who understands business." I told him I'd call him later and hung up. Then I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I couldn't taste and stared at that line item until my eyes blurred. The next morning, I drove to Crestwood Self-Storage alone. I had a copy of Daniel's death certificate, our marriage certificate, and a folder of account documents, which I thought was probably overkill for a storage unit. It wasn't. The front office manager was a woman named Patrice, about 60, with reading glasses on a beaded chain and a no-nonsense expression that softened when I explained why I was there. She pulled up the account, looked at me for a moment over the top of her glasses. "Your husband left specific access instructions," she said. "What kind of instructions?" "He updated the account 11 months ago." She turned the monitor slightly so I could see. "He added your name as the emergency contact and wrote a note." She pointed to a comment field. It said, "If anything happens to me, give her the envelope first. Do not give access to anyone else, including family." My chest did something complicated. Patrice opened a locked drawer beneath the counter and set a small manila envelope on the desk. My name was written on the front in Daniel's handwriting, neat and deliberate. The same handwriting that used to leave notes in my jacket pockets. The same handwriting I'd been trying not to look at on the grocery list, still stuck to our refrigerator. "Can I have a few minutes?" I asked. Patrice nodded and stepped into the back room without a word. I opened the envelope. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a key attached to a small tag that read 14B. The note said, "Mara, if you're reading this, I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I wanted to be sure before I brought you into it. The unit has everything you need to understand what I've been building. Don't let Marcus near it. He knows some of what's inside, and he will try to use it. Trust yourself. You're smarter than anyone in that family ever gave you credit for. I love you, D." I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my coat pocket. Unit 14B was at the far end of the facility, at the back of a covered row, away from the entrance. I rolled up the door and stood in the gap while my eyes adjusted to the fluorescent light that flickered on automatically. It wasn't band equipment. 3 metal shelving units lined the walls, floor to ceiling. Banker's boxes, each one labeled in Daniel's handwriting. Hard drives in labeled plastic cases. A locked cabinet in the corner with a combination lock. A small folding table in the center with a laptop, a charging station, and a stack of legal folders held together with a rubber band. On top of the stack was a post-it note. It said, "Start here." I sat down on the folding chair in front of the table, in the cold air that smelled like cardboard and metal, and I opened the first folder. Daniel had been building a software company, not a hobby, a real company. 3 years of development on a proprietary logistics platform, something he designed to help small regional trucking companies manage their routing and compliance in one system. The folder had incorporation documents, a registered LLC in Delaware, a trademark application, letters of intent from 2 regional carriers, an evaluation summary from a consultant he'd hired 7 months ago. The estimated market value if he went to Series A funding was listed in a range between $4 and $11 million. I sat there for a long time without moving. He'd been a project manager for a mid-size construction firm during the day. I'd known he worked late sometimes, that he had calls he took in the car or in the spare bedroom with the door shut. I'd thought he was decompressing. I'd thought he was playing video games or watching sports. I had not thought he was building a company worth potentially $11 million in a storage unit on Crestwood Drive. The next folder contained correspondence, emails printed and organized by date. Most were between Daniel and a developer named Callie Orr, who had apparently been writing the platform's core code remotely for 2 years. There were also emails between Daniel and a corporate attorney named Phil Reyes, and there were 3 emails between Daniel and Marcus. I read those slowly. The first was Marcus asking Daniel to bring him in. His exact words, "You need a partner who knows how to scale this. I have the contacts. Cut me in at 15% and I'll get you in front of the right people." The second was Daniel's response. "Not at this stage. I need to retain full control through Series A. We can talk about advisory roles after." The third email was Marcus again. It was dated 4 months before Daniel died. It was longer. It said that he'd already spoken to one of the potential investors, told them that Daniel was difficult to work with and not the right face for the platform, and that Marcus had positioned himself as a co-founder. He asked Daniel to simply go along with it, sign an amended operating agreement, and they would both benefit. He called it the smarter play. Daniel had printed it out and written a single word across the top in red pen. No. My hands were shaking a little, not from cold. I opened the laptop. It booted to a password screen. I tried our anniversary. Nothing. I tried our wedding date. Nothing. I tried the street where we'd met, a bar in Columbus, and the name came back to me, Tillman. I typed it. The screen opened. There was a folder on the desktop labeled with my name. Inside was a video file. I clicked it. Daniel appeared on screen, sitting right here in this unit, at this table. He was wearing a gray Henley I'd bought him for his birthday. He looked tired in that specific way he got when he'd been working too hard, the shadows under his eyes, the set of his jaw. He looked directly into the camera. "Hey," he said. "If you're watching this, then something happened to me. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't tell you all of this while I was alive. I kept it separate because I was superstitious about it, I think. I didn't want to jinx it before it was real. And then it got complicated with Marcus, and I didn't want to pull you into that until I knew how to handle it." He leaned forward slightly. "Everything you need is in this unit. The company is legally yours as the sole heir. Callie Orr knows what she's doing. Phil Reyes will walk you through the legal side. The investors, the 2 you'll find in the folder labeled LOI, they're legitimate. They've been patient. Marcus is going to come for this. He already tried to claim co-founder status to at least one of them. Do not let him rewrite what this was. This was mine. And now it's yours. I love you. I'm sorry it took me this long to say all of this out loud." The video ended. I sat in a storage unit in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday and cried for about 10 minutes. Then I wiped my face, took a picture of every document in that first folder, and drove home. Marcus called that evening. I didn't answer. He texted, "We need to meet. There are things about Daniel's business dealings you don't understand yet." I stared at the text for a moment, then set the phone face down on the counter. I called Phil Reyes the next morning. He picked up on the second ring, like he'd been expecting to hear from me. "Mrs. Colton," he said, "I'm so sorry for your loss. Daniel spoke about you often. He left me a video," I said, "and a storage unit full of documents. Can we meet today?" We met at his office downtown, a small but well-organized space on the fourth floor of a building near the courthouse. He was in his mid-50s, methodical, the kind of person who organized his desk calendar by hand. He already had a folder open when I sat down. Daniel updated his estate documents 8 months ago, Phil told me. The LLC is structured so that full ownership transfers to you upon his death. He also left a notarized letter on file with me describing Marcus's attempt to claim a co-founder role. He anticipated this might become a dispute. It already is, I said. I showed him Marcus's texts. Phil read them and set the phone down carefully. He's going to try to pressure you into signing something, or he'll go around you directly to the investors. Has he contacted Callie Orr? I didn't know. I found out that afternoon when I called Callie for the first time. She was in Portland, Oregon, quiet-voiced and sharp, the kind of person who chose words carefully. He emailed me 2 days after Daniel died, she said. He introduced himself as a co-founder and told me that going forward, all decisions would need his approval. He asked me to send him admin access to the repository. Did you? No, she said flatly. Daniel had told me about him. He said if anyone other than you contacted me claiming authority, to ignore it and call Phil. He told you that? He was thorough, she said. That's why I kept working with him. That evening, my sister Jess came over. She was 26, finishing her last year of nursing school, practical in the way that only younger siblings of chaotic households tend to become. She sat across from me at the kitchen table while I laid out everything I'd found. The documents, the video, the emails, Phil's summary. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, Marcus knew about this for at least 4 months before Daniel died. Yes. And he tried to cut himself in. Yes. And Daniel said no. Very clearly. Jess picked up the printed email with the red no across the top. Okay, she said. What do we do? That was the first moment I felt something other than grief and shock, something more useful. The next day, Marcus showed up at my apartment. I hadn't let him in, but he'd buzzed until I answered. He came upstairs with the practiced patience of someone who'd decided to be reasonable about something unreasonable. You need to understand what Daniel was building, he said, settling into the armchair across from my couch like he'd been invited. It's not as simple as inheriting an LLC. There are relationships, investors, a development team. You have no background in any of this. I have a development team member who won't take your calls, I said. Something shifted behind his eyes. Callie is territorial. She and I had some friction. That's normal in startups. She said you asked for admin access to the codebase. He shrugged. I was trying to get a handle on where things stood. You're not on the operating agreement, Marcus. He leaned forward. Mara, Daniel talked to me about this for 2 years. He came to me for advice. I have an implied role here, and any business attorney would tell you. My business attorney already told me something different, I said. He told me about the notarized letter Daniel filed 8 months ago, specifically describing your attempt to claim co-founder status as unauthorized. The shift behind his eyes this time was less controlled. That letter is going to be relevant, I continued, if you file any kind of claim. Phil says it documents a pattern, your email, the conversation you had with one of the investors. It's all written down. He stood up. You're making a mistake. You don't know how to run this. I'm not running it yet, I said. I'm protecting it. After he left, I sat on the couch and breathed for a minute. Then I texted Phil. He came to my apartment. I need you to send a letter. Phil replied within the hour. The letter went to Marcus directly, and to his personal attorney, whom Phil had apparently already identified. It stated clearly that Marcus had no ownership interest in Colton Logistics Solutions LLC, that any communication to investors, developers, or partners misrepresenting his role was potentially actionable, and that further contact with me regarding the company should go through Phil's office. Marcus didn't text me again that day. But 3 days later, an article appeared on a local business blog. The headline was something about a promising regional startup in limbo after founder's death, and it quoted an unnamed family member saying that the founder's widow had no technical background and that the platform's future was uncertain. It suggested that the company might need new leadership to reach its potential. Jess texted me a screenshot at 7 in the morning. He's doing the media thing. I'd expected it, based on nothing except the fact that Marcus operated by controlling perception before he controlled anything else. I called Phil. "Don't respond to the article directly," he said. "I'll reach out to the 2 LOI investors today and give them the actual picture. They need to hear from us before they hear from him again. What's our position with them? Solid, if we move quickly." They signed letters of intent with Daniel's company, not with Marcus. The platform itself is the asset. As long as Callie keeps the code base stable and we can show continuity of development, they'll stay at the table. I called Callie again that afternoon. I asked her directly if she was willing to keep working under the new ownership structure, with me at the head of it. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Daniel told me you were a graphic designer." "I am. Do you know anything about logistics software?" "Not yet," I said. Another pause. "That's an honest answer," she said. "Yes. I'll keep going. But I want a formal contract. Not just a verbal agreement." "Phil will send it tomorrow morning," I said. I heard her exhale, and something in it sounded like relief. "He really did love you," she said. "He talked about telling you all of this so many times. He kept saying he wanted it to be real first." I didn't trust my voice for a second. "I know," I finally said. The following week, I asked Jess to come with me to the storage unit. I wanted a second set of eyes on everything before I started making decisions. She stood in the middle of the space looking at the shelves, the labeled boxes, the careful organization of 3 years of hidden work. "He built all of this himself?" she said. "Mostly. Callie built the code. He built everything else." She pulled a box from the shelf, labeled Market Research Year 2. Flipped through it. "There's so much here." "I know." She set the box down and looked at me. "What does Phil think you should do?" "He thinks we should proceed toward the Series A. The investors are still interested. Callie says the platform is about 80% of the way to launch ready. Phil thinks with the right presentation, we could close within 6 months. And Marcus? Phil filed a cease and desist. He also sent documentation of Marcus's original email to Daniel and the unauthorized investor contact to the investors themselves, so they have the full picture now. Jess was quiet for a moment. "What does Marcus do if he can't get in legitimately?" "He makes noise," I said. "He already is," she nodded. "Then we make facts louder than noise." It sounded simple when she said it. It was not simple. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus escalated. He contacted the regional carriers who had signed letters of intent and told them the platform's development timeline was compromised. He reached out to Callie's professional contacts in the developer community, posting vaguely worded comments on LinkedIn suggesting the project had leadership problems. He called Daniel's mother, who called me in tears, saying Marcus had told her I was planning to sell the company to a competitor and pocket the money. I drove to see Daniel's mother that same afternoon. She lived 40 minutes away, a small house in a suburb that always smelled like the same candle, vanilla and cedar. She opened the door and pulled me into a hug that lasted longer than usual. We sat at her kitchen table, and I told her everything. I showed her the printed emails on my phone, Marcus's message to Daniel and Daniel's red no. I showed her the video Daniel had recorded, played it on my phone's screen right there at her kitchen table. She watched it with her hands folded in her lap and her lips pressed together. When it ended, she didn't say anything for a moment. "He always did things his own way," she finally said. "He got that from his father, not from Marcus." "I know." She looked at me steadily. "What do you need from me?" "I just need you to know the truth," I said. "Marcus can say what he wants. I'm not selling anything. I'm not dismantling what Daniel built. I'm trying to finish it." She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. "Then finish it." After I left, I sat in my car in her driveway and called Phil. "I need to know how long we can hold Marcus off legally," I said. "The cease and desist gives us some room. If he contacts the investors again directly, we file for an injunction. His attorney knows this. He's pushing at the edges, seeing what holds." "And what holds?" "Ownership documents," Phil said. "The notarized letter. The operating agreement. Callie's work logs showing continuous development under Daniel's direction. All of it holds. He has nothing. He has a story," I said. "Stories only work when the other side stays quiet," Phil said. I took that seriously. 2 days later, I called both LOI investors directly. One was a regional logistics fund out of Cincinnati, the other a private investor in Nashville who'd made his money in supply chain consulting. I introduced myself, acknowledged that they'd been hearing conflicting information, and asked for 30 minutes each to walk them through the actual state of the platform. Both of them agreed. I brought Jess to the first call for moral support, and because she's good at reading rooms, even phone rooms, I laid out the ownership structure, Callie's timeline, the platform's completion status, and what the next development milestones would be. The Cincinnati Fund's partner was direct. He said Marcus had contacted them claiming to be a co-founder. I told him about the notarized letter. He asked for a copy. Phil sent it within the hour. The Nashville investor was quieter, asked more technical questions about the platform itself that I had to relay to Callie in real time, texting her under the table while I talked. But he stayed on the call for 50 minutes, which felt like a good sign. After both calls, I sat in my apartment with Jess and a takeout container of Thai food and tried to assess where we actually stood. The fund wants to see a product demo in 30 days, I said. Jess pointed her fork at me. Can Callie do it? She says she can. She wants to hire one additional developer to accelerate the final push. I said yes. Can we afford it? Daniel had reserves in the LLC account, I said. Phil checked. There's enough to cover 2 months of runway. Jess ate a bite of noodles thoughtfully. And Marcus? Phil says he's been quiet for 4 days. That probably means he's regrouping. She nodded. He'll come back before the demo. She was right. A week before the scheduled product demonstration, Marcus filed a claim in probate court. He alleged that Daniel had verbally promised him a 15% equity stake, that this constituted an oral contract under Ohio law, and that the LLC could not proceed with any material business decisions until the matter was resolved. Phil called me before I'd even seen the filing. It's a nuisance claim, he said. Oral contracts for equity in an LLC are extremely difficult to prove, especially against written operating documents. But it will create delay if we let it. What do? We respond immediately with the full written record. We also file a countermotion arguing that the claim is frivolous and designed to interfere with the company's operations. The judge assigned to this case has a reputation for being impatient with exactly this kind of thing. How long does it take? If we move fast, we can get a hearing within 2 weeks. The demo is in 1 week, I said. Phil was quiet for a beat. Do the demo on schedule, he said. Don't let his court filing be the reason the investors lose confidence. Show them the platform. Show them you're not rattled. The demo almost didn't happen. 2 days before it, Callie's internet went out for 6 hours due to a storm in Portland. We moved the demo to her phone hotspot and tested it 4 times. One of the investors called to reschedule, then unrescheduled when I told him we'd resolved the technical issue. Jess came to my apartment for the actual call and sat off camera, holding a legal pad where she'd written, "You know this," in large letters. The demo ran 45 minutes. Callie walked them through the platform's interface while I handled questions about business development, timeline, and the legal situation. I was direct about the court filing. I said it was a nuisance claim from an individual with no documented ownership interest, that we had a notarized letter from Daniel specifically addressing it, and that our counsel expected resolution within 30 days. Neither investor seemed surprised. Both of them had dealt with worse. The Cincinnati Fund said they would have a decision within 2 weeks. The Nashville investor said he had one more question. Why are you doing this? He asked. It would be easier to sell the company as is and walk away. I thought about Daniel's note. You're smarter than anyone in that family ever gave you credit for, because he built it, I said. And he left it to me. And I think that means something. There was a pause on the line. Okay, he said. Send me the updated financials. The court hearing was 11 days later. Phil had prepped me thoroughly. We walked in with the operating agreement, the notarized letter, the printed email chain, including Marcus's offer and Daniel's refusal, and a declaration from Callie detailing 3 years of documented work under Daniel's sole direction. Marcus arrived with his attorney and a thin file of notes. The judge was a woman in her late 50s who read the filings the way a contractor reads a structural assessment, efficiently, and with the clear intention of identifying what didn't hold weight. She gave Marcus's attorney 12 minutes to argue the oral contract claim. His argument was that Daniel had said, in a conversation at a family dinner, that he wanted Marcus involved, that this constituted intent. That intent was legally significant. She gave Phil 7 minutes to respond. He used 4. The notarized letter alone dismantled the claim. It was specific, dated, and witnessed. It described Marcus's email offer, Daniel's refusal, and Daniel's concern that Marcus would attempt to assert a role he was never given. Phil also presented the probate filing. Phil had already made establishing me as sole heir to all LLC assets. He presented Callie's declaration. He presented the operating agreement with Daniel's signature and no one else's. The judge dismissed Marcus's claim. She used the word frivolous once, quietly, and made a note to refer the filing to the court's sanctions review committee. Marcus stood up as she finished and said something that his attorney immediately put a hand on his arm to stop. Outside the courthouse, Phil shook my hand and told me we'd hold off on the civil damages claim for now, that the dismissal alone sent a clear message. I thanked him and walked to where Jess was waiting on the front steps. She handed me a coffee she'd gotten from the cart on the corner. "How'd it go?" "Dismissed," I said. She didn't say anything for a second. Then she put her arm around my shoulders and squeezed once. That was enough. The Cincinnati Fund came back with a term sheet 10 days later. The Nashville investor followed 4 days after that with a matching offer at the higher end of the original valuation range. Phil spent a week negotiating the terms. I spent that week learning enough about the platform to ask better questions, calling Callie every other morning, reading the market research Daniel had organized in those labeled boxes. Callie hired the additional developer. His name was Troy, and he was based in Austin. And within 2 weeks of joining, he had closed out 3 of the final 5 technical milestones. Callie sent me a message one night that just said, "We're going to make the launch date." I sat at the kitchen table with Daniel's note unfolded in front of me, the one from the envelope at the storage facility, and I read it again. "The unit has everything you need. I love you. D." The company launched 4 months after his death. We called it what he'd already named it, which I only found out when Phil showed me the trademark filing. Ridgeline, named for the view from the hiking trail where we'd had our first real conversation, about 5 years before we were married, when we were still just 2 people who knew some of the same people and kept ending up at the same places. He'd pointed at the line where the trees met the sky and said it was the kind of view that made him want to build something permanent. I hadn't remembered that until I saw the name on the filing. And then I remembered it completely. The launch was quiet, the way most software launches are. A press release Phil helped me draft. A message to the carrier partners who'd been waiting. A post on the company's LinkedIn page that got more engagement than I expected, mostly from people who'd worked with Daniel in the logistics space and were surprised to learn what he'd been doing outside of his day job. Jess reposted it with a caption that just said, "His wife finished what he started." It got 300 shares overnight. Marcus didn't reach out. His attorney sent a short letter to Phil acknowledging the court outcome and confirming no further claims would be filed. I filed it in the folder labeled closed. Then I put the folder at the back of the drawer and closed it. The storage unit on Crestwood Drive is empty now. I spent a Sunday clearing it out, Jess helping me move boxes to my car, the labeled hard drives going into the fireproof cabinet in my home office. The last thing I took out was the folding chair Daniel had used when he sat at that table and recorded the video. I put it in the trunk. I still have it. I use it at my own desk sometimes, when I'm on calls with Callie or reviewing documents with Phil or going over the quarterly metrics that now land in my inbox from someone Daniel would have hired if he'd had more time. It's not comfortable, exactly, but it feels like being close to something. There's a version of this where I sold the company when the first offer came, took the money, grieved quietly, and moved forward without the court filings and the investor calls and the storage unit visits at 7 in the morning when I needed to see his handwriting on the boxes again. I thought about that version more than once, in the bad weeks, but he left me the key for a reason. He left me the note and the video and 3 years of work in labeled boxes for a reason. He said "I love you" in a recording I've now watched more times than I could count, and the thing that comes after that, the thing he didn't say out loud, but left in every document and every careful label and every plan he made to protect what he'd built, is, "I trust you with this." That's the thing about secrets. Sometimes they're not hidden because the person is ashamed. Sometimes they're hidden because the person isn't ready yet, and they're building towards something they want to hand you whole. The lighthouse beam that swept across Daniel's video screen was just a desk lamp, reflected in the storage unit window. But I think about what it meant the same way. Not a warning. A guidepost, something left on to help you find your way back. I found my way back.